Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me again. I'd like to discuss some approaches to Buddhism here that aim to take away a little bit of the complication. So the impetus for this is just some comments I've received from people here and there, often, in a casual conversation, and they find out, that I'm a Buddhist teacher and teach meditation, and often I think people get quite interested because those who know what it is a little bit, there's some fascinating ideas in Buddhism. So, when someone's interest peaks, they often want to talk a little bit about it. And then, for the casual observer of Buddhism, or someone who's read a book here and there from a Buddhist author, or watch something on YouTube or whatever, they often will say, Buddhism's pretty complicated. It's a little bit too complicated for me, or some version of that. And I can really empathize with them. I think, part of the irony in choosing to talk on this here about a way to uncomplicate Buddhism is I'm often talking in very complicated ways about it. So I know that's a little ironic. But for me as a practitioner over, almost 25 years here of exploring the Buddhist path, I increasingly find less complex ways to get benefit from it. And maybe in a way that's because of, putting time into a lot of very, I wouldn't call them complex, but let's say sort of tricky philosophical areas. And I have a passion for that. I just really enjoy doing that. So maybe at some point, sort of those become a little bit more fluid. Though for me, I feel like a beginner pretty much every day. So that never ends, that study and that, growing the understanding of the Buddhist path. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, over time, I've found ways to weave it into my life that are less complicated. And I just thought to offer some of that here. And this will really depend on you, the listener. It's not something that's so cookie cutter, because it really depends where you're at in your path. But I think it kind of starts with one question, which is, the first one's more of a question to look at our motivation, which is, why do we want simplicity? Right? If something's too complex, are we struggling just because it's challenging? Is that where the resistance is? Are we struggling because we can't put it together and don't understand how to make it a cohesive spiritual path for us? And those are two different things. Let's start with the latter, right? If we're having trouble understanding something or making it more a cohesive path, in this case, the Buddhist path, for a sustainable spiritual practice, meditation practice for us, we all struggle with that at some point, and so we may need some support. We may need to look at where the bottlenecks are happening, get some help with that, or just do more study and have some. Peer support or some teachers or a container for that. That can be really helpful. But we all struggle with that, just because, as we go deeper into the Buddhist path, it does get, it seems like just there's more, right? In the first case, if we're just being challenged, that's a different thing, because, things that are often the most worthwhile in our lives, in my opinion, are challenging. They are hard. And there's a reason for that, because that's how we grow. If we weren't challenged, we wouldn't be able to grow. So I think we kind of have to look at our situation personally and see, are we resisting because we're being challenged in ways that are creating stress for us, or we're impatient with? Or are we being challenged, or is it difficult to deal with the complication because we just need a container that's going to be more skillful? We need some more help. So that's a good thing to make a distinction on. But getting back to the task at hand here, talking about a less complex Buddhism, Buddhism at the end of the day is really about becoming more free and fluid. And I think, and that's an internal experience at first. And I think there's a lot of ideas on what freedom means. And even in Buddhism, there's a lot of different ideas. So the first thing is just getting familiar with that. And I think we can all see where we get bottlenecked eventually and we lack freedom, which is, mainly in how we interact with our thinking mind and beliefs. So if we can create some more space in the mind, this is often the first step. So I think keeping it simple and not so complicated really relies on some kind of practice of meditative awareness. And that could be as simple as watching the breath and then clicking into the awarer who's watching the breath. Or of course, that can evolve into all kinds of practices. But the thread, the root of the practice needs to be the cultivation of awareness. Because for me, when I'm cultivating awareness and, when I'm discussing it and teaching it, it connects us to a sense of spaciousness. And that spaciousness allows for simplicity within complexity, which is something we all need because the world is complex. We can't go back to a more simple world. I don't think that's possible. It's just moving forward and we have to learn to meet it, however challenging that is. And of course, that includes our internal experience, which is really complex. I mean, the world is complex because we are complex, right? So often we don't talk about that. We just sort of objectify it and think, oh, there's a world out there that's complex. I'm totally simple here and, all that. But the truth is, it's complex for us if we are complex. I can relate to that personally, not sure if you can. But it's something to think about. So this thread of awareness and the cultivation of spaciousness, not as a state, but as a way of interacting with ourselves. So here, when it comes to awareness meditation, or what we call shamatha in Buddhism, meditative awareness, it's not about pushing things away and then carving out a small space where nothing bothers us. No, it's about including the complexities of life and opening up to a more spacious relationship with them. So really, when it comes to demystifying a Buddhist practice and or making it a little less complex for ourselves, this is really important. We need to have a practice where we are cultivating awareness that's inclusive, where we're meeting more and more of our experience with openness. We're able to host more of our experience and allow that to move, allow things to arise and fall. Now, I'm not saying that's easy. That takes time to grow, but it's not complex, right? Right? It's not complicated. It just takes sitting down, putting a plan together for a daily meditation practice, and then, of course, how we want to integrate that throughout the day. And then, of course, over time, as we dedicate, we're going to be able to allow that space to happen more. So that's probably the number one thing. Second, if we actually want to go deeper into Buddhist studies and understand the Buddhist path a little more and understand the structure of it and how to take our knowledge of it deeper so it can affect our life, more or less, there's three basic principles, and there's many ways to talk about these. The first one is around looking at our mind that seeks unhappiness. Now, that's like a weird thing to say because nobody seeks unhappiness, and we are often actively seeking happiness. But here, what I'm alluding to is often what we label as happiness doesn't create happiness. What we label as unhappiness is not necessarily going to lead to unhappiness. Meaning, if we're going through a challenging emotion or experience, our meditative awareness can eventually give us the tools to be with that, to bear witness to that in a healthy way, where we don't have to turn a blind eye, suppress, indulge, become, etc. Similarly, we can also question those experiences of what I call fleeting happiness that don't lead us anywhere. They just sort of happen. There's of course pleasure, and then it's gone and it dissolves, right? So in classic terms, we call this developing renunciation mind in Buddhism, but really what it means is developing some clarity of seeing on what actually is going to lead to more lasting happiness and what is just fleeting happiness that we keep chasing but doesn't go anywhere. So that's really the first principle. The second principle is in relation to what it means to be awake. And so we already actually started talking about this because we were talking about spaciousness, awareness, the fluidity that comes from that. And if we continue our awareness practice through shamatha or meditative awareness practice, and then different kinds of vipassana or insight meditation techniques, we can start to have wider tastes of that fluidity experientially. And this also starts to provide a ground or a confidence that we can be free. Because again, freedom here, or awakening, it's pretty specific in Buddhism, and it's connected to this term bodhicitta, right? So bodhicitta means the mind of awakening, and it includes both the expansion and fluidity of our mind and our experience, but also how that connects with a sense of altruism and responsibility for others around us, which includes in the motivation of bodhicitta this sense that we want to become free. We're starting to get a wider taste of that through meditation. And we also wish that for others. And so we start to include others, those we like, those we dislike, those we have indifference towards, because we start to recognize all beings want genuine lasting happiness. All beings want freedom, despite how they act. And so we start to cultivate equanimity and include more and more beings, of course, people, but also non-human beings, animals, etc. And this starts to open our heart, right? Both because we're finding freedom, and also because we see the potential for others. Because we're not special. Like, we all have the capability with our human minds to expand our freedom nature. So that's really embodied in bodhicitta. And bodhicitta actually has two aspects. We've been talking about them already. It has the relative aspect of just growing our altruistic, compassionate conduct, and I guess you could say aspirations. So it's aspirational. We want ourselves and others to be more free in a lasting way. And then we're also recognizing that freedom comes from removing the layers of perception that get in the way of actually interacting with reality in relationship, more from a sense of fluidity rather than gripping and clinging. And this would be more the absolute aspect of bodhicitta, or sometimes we use the term shunyata or emptiness or Buddhist non-duality to represent this. This would be the third aspect. But it could be part of bodhicitta as well, because bodhicitta, as I said, it has both aspects, both the kind of opening the heart towards others, the altruism with that, and this aspect of actually touching down in our own minds through our own awareness with genuine freedom. So both of these need to happen, because if we're not tasting freedom through meditation and our mind's nature, it's going to be difficult to develop genuine aspiration for others to be free, because we don't have really a sense of what that really means, right? I mean, of course, we can have like a conceptual idea, and for most of us, we have to start there, but we need to taste it. And so this needs to happen through meditation. And so when we're demystifying the Buddhist path, or we're making it a little bit less complex, we can organize it into this structure of first looking in an honest way, in a sober way, at the mind that seeks happiness and doesn't find it. And we start to sober up a little bit. We start to see, okay, something in the way I pursue happiness, not all the time, but some of the times, it's just not working anymore. And we start to break up with that kind of relationship to our life. And I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be outer things. It's the way our mind seeks. So we start to turn the mind, and that's connected to this principle of renunciation mind. The second, bodhicitta, has these two factors, this factor of both cultivating compassion and equanimity for others, and I guess you could say altruism, and then the spacious aspect of mind that continues through awareness, the fluidity that we start to connect with, which eventually can become Buddhist non-duality, or can eventually flirt with reality as it is, which is interdependent and in relationship. So I recommend this because we often call these the three principal aspects of the path. They really, you can see these repeated in different forms of Mahayana Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, in many different ways, including in the Vajrayana teachings. So you see these show up in different ways. And so if we kind of get our head around these and then some practice of them, we're going to have not only a more robust practice, but we're not going to get as confused when we're looking at the complexity of it. So I guess when in doubt, or when it's becoming really complex, try to see the underlying structure underneath. And that's what I'm trying to provide here. One idea of how that structure can look. So anyways, I think I'll end it there. If you'd like me to talk more about this and go into more detail on these three principal aspects of the path, let me know. I'm happy to do that. And as always, feel free to reach out if you want some deeper support in your practice, or comment here if you have any questions. And yeah, I really appreciate you watching or listening to this. Take care. Thanks so much.